Thanks for visiting Nancy's Classic Bedtime Stories. I'm Nancy, and I'm beginning to read The Essential Wisdom of the Founding Fathers, edited by Carol Kelly Gangi. The introduction. In this unsettling time in our nation's history, the words of the Founding Fathers take on an heightened resonance as Americans struggle to find common ground on such complex issues as the meaning of patriotism, the scope of an individual's rights, be it equal rights, privacy rights, or civil rights, as well as defining the appropriate role of government in our nation today. The Essential Wisdom of the Founding Fathers gathers together more than 300 quotations from those men who were leading figures in the founding of the United States, those who participated in the Revolutionary War, and those who drafted and signed the documents upon which the fledgling nation was founded. Of course, the main contributors in any collection focused on the Founding Fathers are the giants of the American history such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and Thomas Paine. Also included, however, are selections from other patriots, men lesser known to us perhaps, but important figures nonetheless in the singular roles they played in the struggle for American independence. What comes through from each of these men is their undying passion for the cause of liberty, their personal belief in a higher power, coupled with their equally fervent belief in a religious tolerance, and their deep devotion to family and domestic happiness. In the selections, John Adams confides to his wife about the toil and blood that will be required to gain freedom. Thomas Paine rails against the tyranny to which the colonists have been subjected. Benjamin Rush recalls the fear and silence that permeated the hall when the men signed their names to the Declaration of Independence. George Washington poignantly describes the atrocious hardships his troops have patiently endured at Valley Forge. And Thomas Jefferson reflects on the malleability of the Constitution. In other selections, the founders speak about the role of government, the meaning of patriotism, and the horrors of slavery. Despite the fact that many of them were slave owners themselves, here too are pithy extracts, many from Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, on such varied subjects as diet and exercise, marriage, procrastination, and personal finance. The Essential Wisdom of the Founding Fathers invites readers to view our nation through the eyes of the men who were there from the beginning and who struggled mightily for the liberties that are now a part of the American landscape. Perhaps the words of John Adams to Thomas Jefferson, written in 1818, sum up just how bold and innovative this American experiment was, and how far we have come towards realizing the ideals that the Founding Fathers only dreamed of for themselves. When people talk of the freedom of writing, speaking, or thinking, I cannot choose but laugh. No such thing ever existed. No such thing now exists, but I hope it will exist. But it must be hundreds of years after you and I shall write and speak no more. Carol Kelly Gangi, Rumson, New Jersey, 2009. And so we begin. The Revolutionary War. Then joined hand in hand, brave Americans all, by uniting we stand, by dividing we fall. John Dickinson, The Liberty Song, 1768. This is the most magnificent movement of all. There is a dignity, a majesty, a sublimity in this last effort of the patriots that I greatly admire. The people should never rise without doing something to be remembered, something notable and striking. This destruction of the tea is so bold, so daring, so firm, intrepid, and inflexible, and it must have so important consequences and so lasting that I can't but consider it as an epoch in history. John Adams, his diary entry on the Boston Tea Party, December 17, 1773. The die is cast. The people have passed the river and cut away the bridge. John Adams, writing about the Boston Tea Party, December 1773. Blandishments will not fascinate us, nor will threats of a halter intimidate, for under God we are determined, that wheresoever, whensoever, or howsoever we shall be called to make our exit, we will die free men. Josiah Quincy, responding to the closing of Boston Harbor by the British, 1774. A settled plan to deprive the people of all the benefits, blessings, and ends of the contract, to subvert the fundamentals of the Constitution, to deprive them of all share in making and executing laws, will justify a revolution. John Adams, Novangelis Papers, 1774. The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time. Thomas Jefferson, Summary View of the Rights of British America, 1774. We live, my dear soul, in an age of trial. What will be the consequences? I know not. John Adams, Letter to Abigail Adams, 1774. Sink or swim, live or die, survive or perish. I am with my country from this day on. You may depend on it. John Adams, Letter to a Friend, 1774. I am not a Virginian, but an American. Patrick Henry, Speech from the First Continental Congress, October 14, 1774. I am often concerned for you and our dear babes, surrounded as you are by people who are too timorous and too much susceptible of alarms. Many fears and jealousies and imaginary dangers will be suggested to you, but I hope you will not be impressed by them. In case of real danger, of which you cannot fail to have previous intimations, fly to the woods with our children. John Adams, Letter to Abigail Adams, May 2nd, 1774. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable. And let it come. I repeat it, sir. Let it come. It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that surveys from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand idle here? Is life so dark, or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry, speaking to the Virginia legislature, March 23rd, 1775. Don't tread on me. Motto on first American flag, raised by John Paul Jones on the flagship Alfred, December 3rd, 1775. Colonel Washington appears at Congress in his uniform, and by his great experience and abilities in military matters is of much service to us. Oh, that I were a soldier. I will be. I am reading military books. Everybody must, and I will and shall be a soldier. John Adams, Letter to Abigail Adams, May 29th, 1775. Though I am truly sensible of the high honor done me in this appointment, yet I feel great distress from a consciousness that my abilities and military experience may not be equal to the extensive and important trust. However, as the Congress desire it, I will enter upon the momentous duty and exert every power I possess in their service and for the support of the glorious cause. I beg they will accept my most cordial thanks for this distinguished testimony of their approbation. But lest some unlucky event should happen unfavorable to my reputation, I beg it may be remembered by every gentleman in the room that I this day declare, with the utmost sincerity, I do not think myself equal to the command I am honored with. As to pay, sir, I beg leave to assure that Congress that no pecuniary consideration could have tempted me to accept this arduous employment at the expense of my domestic ease and happiness. I do not wish to make any profit from it. George Washington, accepting position as Commander-in-Chief, June 1775. I can answer but three things: a firm belief in the justice of our cause, close attention in the prosecution of it, and the strictest integrity. George Washington. Letter to Colonel Bassett, June 19, 1775. In the language of the Holy Writ, there is a time for all things. There is a time to preach and a time to fight. And now is the time to fight. John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg, spoken in his congregation in 1775 before leaving to join General Washington's troops in Virginia. You may believe me, my dear Patsy, when I assure you, in the most solemn manner, that so far from seeking this appointment, I have used every endeavor in my power to avoid it, not only from my unwillingness to part from you and the family, but from a consciousness of its being a trust too great for my capacity, and that I should find more real happiness in 1 month with you at home than I have the most distant prospect of finding abroad, if my stay were to be 7 times 7 years. But as it has been a kind of destiny that has thrown me upon this service, I shall hope that my undertaking it is designed to answer some good purpose. George Washington, on heading the Continental Army, in a letter to Martha Washington, June 1775. Stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. Jonas Parker, captain of American forces, to his troops prior to the Battle of Lexington, April 19, 1775. What a glorious morning is this. Samuel Adams, on hearing gunfire at Lexington, April 19, 1775. Don't one of you fire till you see the whites of their eyes. William Prescott, Colonel of American Forces, to his troops before the Battle of Bunker Hill, June 17, 1775. As Britain began to use force, it seemed absolutely necessary that we should be prepared to repel force with force. It is a true old saying that make yourself sheep and the wolves will eat you, to which I may add another, God helps them that helps themselves. The general was secure, I suppose, that we would never be able to return the outrage in kind, but the defeat of a great body of his troops by the country people at Lexington, and the action at Bunker Hill, in which they were twice repulsed, and the third time gained a dear victory, was enough to convince the ministers that the Americans can fight, and that this was a harder nut to crack than they imagined. Benjamin Franklin, from his autobiography. Every post is honorable in which a man can serve his country. George Washington, letter to Benedict Arnold, September 14, 1775. The reflection upon my situation and that of this army produces many an uneasy hour when all surround me are wrapped in sleep. Few people know the predicament we are in. George Washington, letter to Joseph Reed, January 14, 1776. There is something very unnatural and odious in a government 1,000 leagues off, a whole government of our own choice, managed by persons whom we love, revere, and can confide in, has charms in it for which men will fight. John Adams, letter to Abigail Adams, May 17, 1776. Before God, I believe the hour has come. My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. All that I have, and all that I am, and all that I hope in this life, I am now ready here to stake upon it, and I leave off as I began, that live or die, survive or perish, I am for the declaration. It is my living sentiment, and by the blessing of God, it shall be my dying sentiment. Independence now, and independence forever. John Adams, speaking at the Continental Congress to the delegates from the 13 colonies, July 1, 1776. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is worth more than the means. John Adams, letter to Abigail Adams, July 3, 1776. What has commonly been called rebellion has more often been nothing but a manly and glorious struggle in opposition to the lawless power of rebellious kings and princes. If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were ever our countrymen. Samuel Adams, speech at State House in Philadelphia, August 1st, 1776. The time is now near at hand, which must probably determine whether Americans are to be freemen or slaves, whether they are to have any property they can call their own, whether their houses and farms are to be pillaged and destroyed, and themselves consigned to a state of wretchedness from which no human efforts will deliver them. The fate of unborn millions will now depend under God on the courage and conduct of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission. We have therefore to resolve to conquer or die. George Washington, Address to the Continental Army before the Battle of Long Island, August 27, 1776. The period of debate is closed. Arms, as the last resource, decide the contest. The blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature cries, "'Tis time to part." Thomas Paine, Common Sense, 1776. I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. Let me say that again. I'm so sorry. I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. Captain Nathan Hale, 21-year-old soldier who was captured behind enemy lines while on reconnaissance for George Washington and hanged by the British, 1776. Let us therefore animate and encourage each other and show the whole world that a free man contending for liberty on his own ground is superior to any slavish mercenary on earth. George Washington, General Orders from his headquarters, New York, July 2nd, 1776. And I will stop right there and upload this part, and then we will continue in the Revolutionary War in a few minutes. Stay tuned.